Hello, and welcome back to the Quiet Archive. Our story tonight begins in the winter of 1888, in the high, cold desert of southwestern Colorado. Two cowboys, Richard Wetherill and his brother-in-law, are riding through the canyons, searching for stray cattle in a driving snow. They guide their horses along the top of a high plateau, known as Mesa Verde. The snow stops. The air becomes suddenly perfectly clear. Across the canyon, through the thin winter light, Richard Wetherill sees something that stops his heart. It is not a cave. It is not a simple ruin. It is a city. A silent, perfect city. Built not on the ground, but inside the canyon wall, tucked under a massive stone overhang. He sees towers, walls, and the dark, round windows of over 150 rooms, all rising from the cliff face as if they had grown there. It is a palace in the stone. They would later call it Cliff Palace. But what Wetherill noticed in that profound, snowy silence was not just the city. It was the emptiness. There was no smoke from any chimney. No voices echoing in the canyon. No one. The city was a perfect vessel from which all life had been poured out. This was not the only one. In the coming years, they would find hundreds more. Spruce tree house, balcony house, entire villages, pristine and abandoned, hidden in the cliffs. Who were the people who built these impossible homes? They were master architects. They were farmers who grew crops on a dry mesa. They were a people who lived balanced between the earth and the sky. And then, around the year 1300, after living this way for centuries, they left. They climbed down from their cliffside homes one last time, walked out into the desert, and never returned. This is the central mystery of the American high desert. Who were they? What did they build? And why did they walk away?
The people we are speaking of were the Ancestral Puebloans. The name we once called them, Anasazi, is a Navajo word that can mean ancient enemies or ancient ones. But they are quite simply the ancestors, and their world was far greater than just the cliff dwellings. If you travel south, into the desert of New Mexico, you find Chaco Canyon. This was their capital, their center. For over 300 years, from 850 to 1150 AD, this was the heart of their civilization. Here, they did not build small villages in the cliffs. They built great houses. The greatest of all was Pueblo Bonito. Imagine a single building, the size of the Roman Colosseum, rising 4 stories high against the canyon wall. It had more than 600 rooms, perfectly arranged in a vast D shape. It was the largest single building in North America for over 700 years, until a skyscraper was built in New York City in the 1880s. And this was just one of at least a dozen great houses in the canyon. They were connected by a network of perfectly straight roads, hundreds of miles long, which did not go around obstacles, but over them. These were a people who understood the sky. Their buildings are aligned with stunning precision to the movements of the sun and moon. At one site, a spiral carved into a rock, the sun dagger, is perfectly pierced by a single beam of light at high noon on the summer solstice. This was a world of ceremony. In their plazas and cliff dwellings, they built round, subterranean rooms called kivas. You would climb down a ladder, through the smoke hole, into the cool, dark earth. This was their church, a place to connect with the spirit world, and to listen to the silence of the ground. For 1,000 years this culture grew, thrived, and watched the stars. They built a society in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on the planet. And then, it ended. The end did not come with fire or invasion. It came as a quiet, gradual emptying. Around the year 1300, the great cities of stone, built to last for eternity, were abandoned. The mystery that baffled those first cowboys was, why? For a century, the leading theory was a simple, terrible one: the climate. Tree ring data shows us that around the year 1276, a catastrophic drought began. It lasted for more than 20 years. The Great Drought, as it is known. The corn withered on the high mesas. The springs in the canyons dried to a trickle. The people who had mastered the sky were now betrayed by it. A world built on corn, beans, and squash could not survive without water. This is, almost certainly, part of the truth. Other scholars see hints of conflict, perhaps a breakdown of their social or religious order, a time of strife. But the word vanished is not the right word. It is a word we use when we don't know the end of the story. But their story did have an end, or rather, a continuation. They did not vanish, they migrated. The Ancestral Puebloans, facing an impossible climate, did the most logical thing a human can do. They packed what they could carry, left behind what they could not, and moved. They journeyed south and east, following the few rivers that remained, searching for new places to plant their corn. They did not disappear. They became the ancestors of the people who live in the pueblos of today, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Acoma and Laguna peoples. Their modern-day descendants say the stories have always been clear. They were not lost. They were on a journey. And so the mystery of the vanishing is, in the end, a story of human resilience. They left their great stone cities behind, perfect and empty. Today, if you go to Mesa Verde or Chaco Canyon, you can stand in the plaza of Pueblo Bonito. You can hear nothing but the wind moving through the empty doorways. You are standing in the quiet archive of a people who were wise enough to know when it was time to leave. They left their old homes to the sun, the stone, and the silence. We close the archive. Good night.